say the Alliance of the Southeast actually has a partnership with DePaul University with the students in the Sustainable Development class. And so the classes actually came out here to take a look at the Southworks site and get a tour of the community. And so the students today are going to be doing presentations on the priorities that we actually came up with as a community. What's unique about this is that the students have a urban planning and sustainable development mindset, and us as a community, we know what we're looking for, and so it'd be nice to have a different perspective on the things that are important to us, but with a different view. So I'd like to introduce Heather Smith from the adjunct professor at DePaul University. And actually before you get started, just really quickly, if you're hungry, there's food over here. There's so please help yourselves. There's also some handouts if you're interested about the local developments that are going on in our community. So we'll talk more about that later.
Cool.
So, Heather?
All right. Well, thank you so much, and a huge thank you to Amalia, to Danielle, and to Alliance of the Southeast, and all of you for being here and for hosting us today. We're really excited. So as Amalia mentioned, my name's Heather Smith, and I've been teaching in DePaul's Geography Department for about 12 years. But last year, I created this new course and decided to make it a service learning course. And what that means is working really closely with Alliance of the Southeast, who is our community partner. That's what DePaul talks about. And DePaul is really trying to establish long-term community partners. You may know of other nonprofits that have worked with DePaul over the years. And so we started out actually the summer before last trying to determine what Alliance of the Southeast would need for a particular project. And so these presentations today are going to be the result of that. And what we've been doing all fall quarter is the students have been working really hard. We came down here once, we've gone all over the city, and we've really tried to approach this from what we call an asset-based community development perspective, or ABCD. So you might hear that term in the presentations. And we've been really trying to build these recommendations and ideas off of the assets that we're seeing and that we've been told about from a lot of you in the community. So the students had to do two different sets of presentations, and what you'll see here is actually three different things. Some students come to us with mapping or geographic information systems capacity, so you'll see some students, they will be presenting their maps. Then there's a group of students that worked on equitable development and put together an infographic, which you'll see in a minute. Another group worked on community-driven processes, and a lot of this is about making arguments around equitable development, making arguments for community-driven processes. Then, on top of that work, each of the students were assigned 4 different subject area groups, and they're going to be making recommendations within those groups, within transportation, housing and gentrification, green, technology, water, all kinds of green issues, and then healthy communities. So without any further ado, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We have our timer over here, so if you see Maddie over there, you know, or Jesse's already saying, you know, that's our timing, and we will have time for questions after every presentation. So please don't be shy. And the way this is going to work from a grading perspective is the students will be getting grades today, but they'll also be adjusting their PowerPoints and their infographics based on feedback or questions from you guys. So part of the rubric is everything clear? Is it understandable? And if it doesn't make sense to you guys, we'd like to know about it. And the students will be making adjustments and submitting that to me in the next week. Anything else before we?
I forgot
to
add that, so all the presentations that the students are doing are based on what we have been talking about as a community as what's important. So the reason why we're talking about equitable development, we originally started working on Southworks, which is a huge, huge development, but there's now about 12 developments on the southeast side, and the whole list and where they're at is over there on one of the handouts. But we were looking at what's happening with like Lincoln Yards and the 78 developments on Northside City that got over $1 billion. And Southworks' last deal falling through because it didn't have funding, in large part because it didn't have funding for remediation. So when we're talking about equitable development, those are like the two like big compare contrast things, because we want to see development in our communities, but the way we want it. And then so that's why they're doing equitable development, a community-driven process, because we think it's really important to have, for the community to have a voice in all of these developments. So more fresh perspective on that. And then the last thing is the issue areas that were chosen were based on our suggestions when we went through our CBA process, and then also our visioning process. So we'll talk about those processes later if you want to get involved in that. But the priorities are listed on our blue sheet over there, and so I just want to give folks context so this isn't, you know, strange, but it's actually related to what we've all been talking about in the community.
Okay, thank you. All right, so why don't we have the Equitable Development Day planners? You guys can just stand here. And you guys can let us know when you're ready to start. Start tonight.
So our group did an infographic on equitable development. My name is Ava.
My name's Maddie.
Aggie.
Melinda.
I'm Claire.
I'm Eli.
So we really try to focus on the disparity between the developments at Lincoln Yards and South Shore, or Southwood, sorry. So Lincoln Yards was offered assistance from the city for redevelopment, and this is largely in part because...
Can you speak up?
Yep, sorry. This is largely in part because of the unemployment and poverty statistics that we have right here. So Lincoln Yards only has 5% unemployment and 12% living below the poverty line, while Southworks is 24% living below the poverty line and 30% unemployment. So we kind of saw this as a big reason why assistance was not offered to Southworks for redevelopment.
And then our next section is just what we call the closer look, and we have a definition of what equitable development looks like, and then as well as a definition of what a TIF is. And then we just have some graphics of the disparities of TIF money between Southworks and Lincoln Yards.
So this is a graph of what that looks like. Lincoln Yards received 1.3 billion TIF for 55 acres, and South Shore received 119 million TIF for 140 acres. And as you can see from the graph that it's reversed, and that's not fair.
And then just specifically looking at more of a specific breakdown of the demographic of South Chicago, there are 75% of the community are African American, 20% are Hispanic, and then only 2% are Caucasian. And that was pulled from a census from the community between the year 2000 and 2016, and based off of 10,330 community members. And so basically just like an overall closing statement to sum up our infographic. South Chicago has been disinvested from and overlooked for generations, with community-based developments and equitable development in mind. The redevelopment of South Chicago has the potential to do better for the community members and also the potential and assets of the community. And then asset-based community development is integral to the revitalization of the community members, but then also the potential that the community has. That's basically it. I guess we can open it up for questions if you guys have more specific that you'd like us to go into.
We can go back to different sections too.
Yeah.
You guys come closer so we can hear you.
Sorry.
I have a question. So when you say that you refer to Southworks and you give statistics, you're really saying South Chicago, right? Okay, because Southworks to me is the empty acreage, and so I was a little confused by, yeah, what did you mean exactly? Okay.
Okay, I have a question. Right there in the middle, from year 2000 to the 2017, 10,000 residents moved out of It would also help if you gave the total number, which is, could be 100,000, 10,000 moved out. Oh, I can see that's 10%. So give that total number, and then I compared to what, so now I know. You might as well give the city of Chicago, in general, the whole city has lost. So it's not just South Chicago has lost. It may be balanced out. No? Okay.
Because if you were to look at the east side, you wouldn't see numbers like that.
Oh, no.
So it's important for them to point it out that South Chicago is losing people versus not every neighborhood is losing people.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Is this specifically South Chicago? Because I know the area that you were looking at was South Chicago East Side and South Shore.
Yeah.
So is this specific to South Chicago, or is it those three areas combined?
Our infographic was specific to just South Chicago.
Okay, because if that's true, if it's 10,000, then I think that's about a third of our community left,
Okay.
which is huge.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah.
Great. Well, let's give these guys a hand for doing this.
Or also,
We could use that, that's really nice.
put the zip codes in.
What's that, Peggy?
Or the zip codes. Either way, you know.
While this group is setting up, was there any feedback about what you, I know we had questions, but is there any feedback about what you liked and didn't like? So that they could keep it in their presentation if you like it, or?
Let's come in and let's.
Show us the money.
I really liked your Tiff and Acreage one. That was a powerful graphic.
So, no matter what, this only pertains to the area of South Chicago, nothing else, correct?
You have to ask each group, because the area that we asked them to look at was South Chicago East Side and South Shore, because those are the areas that were getting some of the most development.
Yeah.
And then we're also closest to Southworks for purposes of comparison with Lincoln Yards.
Okay.
So ask each group.
Who is he? You asked me who he is? Oh, I don't know who he is. Oh. Go back there and do that. Why you up here? Hey! You better get to the back of the class.
We hear commentary doing Facebook Live, which makes it live here.
Don't know who makes it live. It's Phil. Boy, Phil had me down. I'm not doing I like this.
The commentary helps.
Oh, yeah. I can see it.
There's a little group behind us. Mr. Strong snuck up in here. What you doing? What you trying to do?
Get back to my seat. I'm
Oh,
trying to see if that works so that they can project.
I know, because their voices low. They need to speak up. They saying some good stuff. Yeah. Saying is good, but hearing will be even better. The students getting prepared. It's the second presentation. Oh, that helps. Thank you. Oh, okay. Oh, that's still seem like Chicago State should be doing something like this too, though. Everybody should be doing something environmental. I know it was doing so good, wasn't it? And why you not walking around with your speaker anyway? You know you need a speaker all these things. Well, I remember when she started rolling your eyes at me. Oh no, they wrong for that. They need to replace that now. Holiday coming up. You ain't gonna use it for just partying. This is Anna Johnson that's passing my video. Yeah.
Say hi. You talk through the whole thing. I said our commentary makes it better.
Oh my God. I don't know what happened, guys. For some reason the computer is acting up. Oh yeah, they're like a Okay, there go Dave over harassing the students. You see him over there harassing the students? That's Dave. I've seen her, but him. Her seemed familiar, but I don't remember him.
Look at her in the face. When she came in.
Oh, what are you talking about? Anna? That's not Anna. Oh, the smile.
The laughing. I had to do that to take my name. I can't even go because I thought it was Coochie.
Again, let me get a picture of him. Look at that. Oh, maybe that's why I seen her before then. She was a storyteller. Oh, okay, I remember seeing her. Okay. I don't know, should I put this on pause or what? I could pause it, but that means I got to go back and retype all that stuff again. I hate retyping all that stuff. Not that I know. I have not. I think you're giving me way too much credit for this life. Maybe in the wash part, I still haven't figured that thing out yet. Maybe you can do something like that in there. Only thing I can do in the refeed of it, download it and cut this out later. Nobody needs this to take with them. I don't know what done happened though. That was some cheese and crackers is what I'm trying to get something at this point since they playing around over here. Yeah, look like they maybe get somewhere now.
I was trying to stop you walking in front of your own camera. I was trying to stop you walking in front of your own camera. I was saying you could have just it up.
Zach, go. Are you gonna take it out?
I didn't want to. You know, I think I got these already. I did. Get this again.
I'll take you with me for 15.
What's our count? What? What's our count? Because I haven't seen it since September. Oh, it's back.
Yes.
Brittany, you met Mr. Reed. This is my other coworker. This is my musician friend. My fellow Aries. My fellow Aries.
recognizing the
You can say whatever you want.
Okay, I got other pictures of you guys sitting up there enjoying yourself. So you saw what they said about the vote, right? They were talking about the vote. I saw it on Facebook. I know. We back. Okay, did that sit on my face? That's cool too. Okay, they back. I think they got their technical difficulty ready.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you for waiting. Yeah, so we did our infographic on community-driven process. I'm Jessie.
My name's Kelly.
I'm Adam. I'm Chris.
I'm Ella.
I'm Maddie.
And I'm Isabel. So, community-driven process, y'all are in this, everyone in this room is taking a part of community-driven process. And community-driven processes are basically when developments, decisions about like just neighborhoods, buildings, public spaces are made with the input and consent of the people who live there. So community-driven processes are they're unfortunately not necessarily commonplace. A lot of the time decisions are made without people even really knowing. But we're kind of here to talk about the benefits of involving community members into the decisions being made about development and your communities.
So CDP in South Chicago, so South Chicago and South Shore has a lot of assets for developers, and these include like institutions, space, culture, and individual talents that can contribute to the community. And using CDP would ensure that these assets are being enhanced while also addressing like the needs of the neighborhood and community.
Yeah, so just like Isabel was talking about, it is important that communities are involved every step of the process. If we look over to the 606, this was a community project that community was involved in from the beginning, but then they were thrown out of the room. So it's important that communities are involved every step of the way in order to avoid gentrification and other consequences that the community would then be burdened with. And then we just want to talk more about like what the developments would be important to South Chicago. So we have a little Venn diagram saying what developers typically want versus what the communities need. If someone wants to explain that closer.
Yeah, so what developers for South Chicago have wanted, and specifically even South Works, is that they view the area as kind of like a blank slate to just kind of come over and do with what they please, but we know that that's not true and that people have called it home for generations. So what we have seen developers that what they want from the area is to make it retail, real estate, a commercial district. People who would move in would want like a drivable commute, whereas residents have been asking for more access to public transit and development on that, as well as affordable housing, jobs, but what they both have agreed on is that they do want like safety is a main concern, as well as just for the community to succeed as a whole and commitment. Oh, yeah.
And we actually do have a second page ready. Just 1 second here. There we go.
That's a good point.
There it is. And we do see that community-driven processes are a factor in other places. Like, for example, in Mumbai, India, there's a big sanitation issue with human sewage being in the street, which is not great. So what they did is the community really advocated for something as simple as just toilet blocks on the streets for, you know, a better place and less accessible sewage. So this is a way, while a little bit smaller in scale to what we're hoping to see in South Chicago, it is an example for how these sort of processes can take place and actually be effective in the neighborhood as well.
And so in this infographic, we also wanted to include some like ways that community can get involved, because oftentimes like we want things to happen, but then were a little like confused about how we can actually get involved. So we just said hold visioning sessions, which you guys have already been doing an awesome job of doing. Draft a binding community benefits agreement. The word binding is key because oftentimes like those are just looked over, but we want to make sure that those are actually being implemented. And then study the community, its history, its identity, and its present assets. It's really important to actually get to know a community instead of just like looking at it as a means to your ends. And then involve more stakeholders than only just the government and developers, because obviously like other people have a say in what happens in the community as well. Thank you. And yeah, we'd love to hear your questions and your input on what we had to say about community-driven processes. Y'all are definitely in this room, so you're experts on it. Yeah.
Have you guys done any research into parks and schools?
Yeah, definitely. Like we see parks and schools as an asset. Do you have any more ideas on how to involve parks and schools into the process?
Well, one, you could go to schools and actually do surveys with students.
Mm-hmm.
You could talk to park patrons. I sit on 5 park advisory councils in the school reform group,
mm-hmm.
and too many times citywide,
mm-hmm.
the people of the community are not involved in the planning, or the kids are not asked what they think are good for the future of the area.
Yeah.
And that has happened too many times in too many places. And of course, this community, which I don't live in, but I'm well aware of, suffered under the lack of leadership when a certain alderman was here for too many years. And that seriously was a negative issue for the community.
Yeah, we definitely hear that. Take that. Yeah.
So I know you explained the bottom part. What's the top part say?
Oh, that's the example using Mumbai, India as how CDP can be used effectively.
Okay.
We just wanted to provide an example to show that like it's actually something that has and can be implemented into a community.
Can you go to the previous one?
Yeah.
Does it also include job creationism and job development as well? It does.
Yeah, community-driven processes kind of can touch on anything. So it's really about, like, it can be what you want in housing, it could be what you want in transportation, it could be what you want in job development. We've seen that on, like, the red line and purple line, yeah, it's the modernization. They have something where they have community input. There's a certain percentage of local hires on that as well. So, like, it's definitely like not only possible to have jobs, but it's happening in other places in the city too.
Yeah, so it's really, the core of this community-driven process is just like what the community wants, and jobs are definitely one of those big things.
Definitely.
Yes.
What's the top right-hand corner say? Development should be?
So this actually came from some information we got from the visioning sessions. We had pictures of some. So it says relevant, community-driven, sustainable, inclusive, asset-based, and innovative.
I have a small point on presentation, which is take each title, make a separate slide so it's bigger on the screen. So your presentation leaves us a little bit, we can barely read it, and so to have, it's okay to start there, but then to break it down so we can see it. And I don't know. I want someone. I want some photos. I show something about 606 cautionary tale. But bring in some photos with the caption. A photo, they say that one photo is worth 1,000 words. So when you do that, you'll keep our attention more.
Yeah, and I suppose we should have elaborated on this before we started. So this is supposed to be like just one piece of like a flyer that can be like easily handed out. That way people can like, yeah. So we're gonna do presentations with like slides and elaborate a little more after this. But this is just supposed to be like an easy piece of paper that you can hand to somebody.
Did your group spend time at the U.S. Steel property?
We did.
Yes.
So did you read about the proposed development that then never took place?
Yeah.
If you do bring flyers so that we can see that better, don't turn the lights out. We can't read it. Right now, I'm straight into this piece of light over here. So, you know, when you make it dark, don't matter what's on it.
Yeah,
That was somebody else.
Amalia, and she can distribute that.
Over here, that, yes.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, one more thing.
One thing, so not all developers are bad, and I only say that because I work at a nonprofit that's community development.
Yeah, for sure.
So one thing that can be added to your presentation is about community development, that corporations or nonprofits that don't get a lot of funding and that usually are private developers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You also might could bring your little handheld mic. I hear you, but young man in the glasses, I didn't hear a word you said.
Be louder and with conviction.
Yeah. Let's take up the next round. This is our first round of presentations.
Well, I hope these are helpful for them because we want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, we do.
You want to hear what you want to say.
All right.
Don't let the audience be louder than you.
And most importantly, what you got to say is important. We want to hear what you got to say, okay?
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go to the next phase of our presentations. We had 4 students who created maps for you guys. And then and one of them was not able to be here today, but she did submit her map. And I'm going to do the best I can to recreate that.
Yeah, there's no. In fact, I thought it was me. I'm not even sure. I thought she said this, but it could be.
So I'm going to just zoom up and down because I think this is a good medium. So this student focused on hazardous air pollutants in Cook County. The data she has is from the EPA. I'll go down to the south side because I know that's someplace we're interested in. Out of the, and there's 100 facilities in this report from the EPA website, and I'm going to give this data directly over to ASE so you guys can look at it in more detail. But out of the 100 facilities, about 82 have reported to have released toxic chemicals. And the following are the top 5 facilities that have the largest amount of toxic chemicals that were released. Number 1, Finkel and Sons. Number 2, ArcelorMittal Riverdale, LLC. Number 3, Envirite of Illinois. Number 4, Ford Motor Company Assembly. Number 5, Clean Harbors Recycling Services of Chicago. As you can see on the map, a few of the biggest facilities that release these toxic chemicals are in the South Chicago area. She decided to investigate this and its potential effects as some of the chemicals are toxic and it can cause cancer or other serious effects like reproductive effects or birth defects, as well as adverse environmental and ecological effects. So we need to focus on finding ways to mitigate these impacts, especially in areas like South Chicago, where there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's a lot of people who can be easily exposed to these harmful effects. All right, so I will pass this on to SA, or actually I can pass this around to the entire room because that student wasn't available. But I will take, if there is any questions or adjustments you'd like her to make to this map, I can write those down.
I have one question.
Yeah.
I've seen some of this data
Sure.
before. I'm not sure the second largest circle there, I'm not sure what area that is. And
This one here?
Near Northwest.
yes, that one, and what's causing that?
So that would be in her notes, so do take a look at the notes she
Okay.
sent, and I know that looks like it's around,
Finkel.
50.
The Finkel again? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what I find really interesting about this is look where your school is.
Yeah.
And so Finkel was a mile.
Yes.
I mean, I used to live on the near north
Yes.
there for a little while.
Yeah.
And so I used to drive down Cortland. I knew the Finkel property
Yes.
really well. I used to see the flames in the steel mill. I mean, the doors were open, you drive past. And so they went down to 95th Street.
Yes.
And so they're bringing their pollution down the south side,
Yes,
which we're trying to clean up down here.
exactly.
I think most importantly to note though is that they were relocated here. It was not their idea to move. They were relocated here so that they could develop the north side. So that's what people have to understand, that all of that stuff that was unwanted and an obstacle for the redevelopment of the north side was sent down here.
Yeah.
But I think there's more to it. They also got the property they got down here suited their mill better because they're gonna be smaller but more efficient.
Are there?
I mean, there's
Yeah.
the actual manufacturing process was one of the reasons they moved south. I'm not defending it, I'm just telling you that's a fact.
Oh, no, thank you. Are there any adjustments or things that like aren't clear to you when you take a look at this? Yes.
One thing they can add to it, she added the table of the top 5.
The table of the top, great. Okay, thank you.
It looks like there's space in there.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you. Any other comments on this particular? I will take that feedback back to her.
I'm not familiar because I'm not originally from the east side. So what those circles are and the companies, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what Finkel is. I don't know what, I
Sure.
can tell from things that I've been hearing lately. But the majority of them, I have no idea what they are. So even if with whatever the top ones, if she lists the top 5, we should know what they do. What are they emitting? Are they, I don't even know the product that they're dealing with. What does Finkel do?
They're still mill.
Still mill, okay.
And to her credit, she did write up a sheet with all the different chemicals. So we're passing that around. So do, see, after you take a look at that, let me know if you have other feedback.
The question I would have about Finkel is when she did her research and she came up with all of these findings.
Speak up.
Was that information available to her before or after the recent explosion?
This is from 2018 EPA data.
So that would be 119.
Yeah. So she has the source there, and then this goes up to 2018. Any other questions? I'd like to keep going because we've got some more maps.
I would say if she's gonna put the list of like the top 5, maybe put the numbers next to those dots.
Okay.
Pass it around, Dave.
And I will email that document to you as well.
Oh, I like that.
So while the next group gets started, if you want this information, please make sure that you have signed in. So is there anyone who has not signed in?
And
It's in there.
Could you let her get started first?
Hi, so my name is Magda Colasso. I'm from DePaul. This is a map showing the TIF districts and affordable rental housing developments in all of Chicago, as well as a zoomed in portion of the southeast side of Chicago. Currently, since 2018, the biggest location with the highest amount of affordable rental housing developments is in Rogers Park. The southeast side, which is combined of South Shore, South Chicago, and East Chicago. I forgot to put it in there, but it has a combined approximate number of 600. units for affordable housing. However, the vast majority are for senior housing, so it's not affordable across for the entire community. It's just mostly advocated for senior housing. So of course this map reflects an urgent and dire need for affordable housing in all of Chicago and not just the north sides. And that's it. I'm open to any questions.
Can you just read through what that says on the sign? Because I know that's a little hard to read.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I just said.
Okay, all right.
So it's just saying that it's a map showing the TIF district zones and the affordable rental housing developments. I just said that affordable housing typically refers to housing that is affordable for those who are making lower than median income. And then I just put the highest amount of affordable housing developments are located in Rogers Park with a total of 297 units. And then I omitted it on there by accident, but South Shore, South Chicago, and East Chicago have a total number of around 633 units.
When we talk about affordable housing, there are subcategories. Is there
Yeah.
a way of breaking that down to very low income
So-
and so on?
The way that they broke it down, so I got my data from CMAP and also the city of Chicago. So the way that they broke down the affordable housing was by senior housing, specialized housing, and then single family housing.
Okay.
So it wasn't necessarily broken down into different incomes, just different kinds of housing.
You said twice East Chicago, you mean East Side?
East side, yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
So the map shows, the red is all the TIF districts, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's missing an overlay of the number of affordable housing units.
So the dots are the affordable housing developments and not the particular units. Because if I put the units, then it would just be a complete mass of dots, yeah.
Maybe it's a way to just put, like create zones and put like the big number or something.
Yeah, I mean, I could also try and like zoom into different areas as well, like a bigger focus too, if that would help.
Yeah. Like if you said like Rogers Park, you put a big circle and there's how many units in our area, I don't know.
Okay.
It's just missing like a variance of, you know how some maps have degrees where there's like lighter colors and darker colors and higher intensity, and I can't really read. This is just saying where the TIF is, and I can't, the dots aren't, I guess dense enough for me to read that.
Okay, thank you.
That just, I don't know who said it, about the way it's broken down as far as affordable housing is. I think it would be good if it was broken down to what is considered for single family or for seniors or for really low income. If someone was looking at this, I would like to know, so where are these units that you're speaking of? If you say affordable housing and it's all grouped together, that's not broken down enough for someone who might need to know where those are.
Yeah, I would definitely have to look into that just because the data that I got it from, they didn't break it down themselves, so that's something I would have to go a bit deeper into, but I would definitely take a look at that.
So is there, so the dots are the developments, right?
Yeah.
The affordable housing developments. I think there needs to be, going back to Jasmine's point, like some version of scale, because there could be a lot of affordable housing developments for a total of 20 units, and then one big affordable housing unit that's 400 units. So I think if maybe even doing the circles like for size or like so that there's some comparison. Okay. And then the other thing is it would also be good to know, like what you were talking about for South Chicago, that we have a lot of senior housing, but not a lot of single family or specialized housing. So if there's some way to differentiate that on the map, like either maybe color or something so that we know, oh, Rogers Park has all single family, we have all, I'm making this up, but we have all senior housing, they have all single family housing, and I don't know, a different part of the city has specialized housing. It would be helpful to figure out where everything is. And then I also think you should put somewhere on there, even if it's just a footnote, what the definition of affordable is. Because if it's a citywide definition, for us it'd be good to know, because a lot of our folks would not qualify for what's considered affordable by the city.
Oh, yeah.
Much better.
Yes, yeah.
See there, move the table, take the screen over. And then adjust the focus. Third. Yeah.
Oh, here?
Does anyone else need to sign in?
Oh, no. Sign in.
Oh, Control Plus.
Move the table back, make the screen bigger.
Hello, my name is Janan, and my map is on TIF location and density based on total money spent. So right here we have all the locations of all the TIF projects, and associated with it is the dollar amount spent. And you can really tell the density is in one particular area, and there's a lot that isn't dense and probably has very few, if any, at all. And it goes to show who TIF funds are actually working for in this map over here. Because a lot of them are dense in the north and downtown parts of it, and a lot is not dense at all in the south, southeast, and west sides of the city. Any questions? Yes?
So this whole black thing is Chicago.
Yeah.
And all the green spots are where the TIF money is.
Yeah.
And so along the lake, which is on the right-hand side, right?
Yeah.
But you don't know what neighborhoods and areas it is unless you just happen to know where you are looking at a map. So what is the area that is almost devoid of green at the bottom?
That's the southeast, east.
That's my point, exactly. And I don't, there needs to be something so I know because we know. But if I was just looking at this or anyone else who might be concerned about doing something, well, okay, so where are we now? You are here, you know, you even get that in storage. You're here, if you wanna go here, you gotta go there. But it should be, you know, right down there in southeast side Chicago, and then Lakeshore Drive, and then north side, and whatever.
If that map could be accentuated and divided into either one of the 77 neighborhoods or the 50 wards or something like that.
Would it be helpful if he's able to zoom in a little bit the way the last map did with like kind of a circle showing?
Not really, because there's nothing to let me know where it is. I mean, it doesn't even say, you know, southeast, it doesn't say Pullman, or, you know, there's nothing to let me know. I just know because I know the map of Chicago.
Or if there was an easy way to develop an overlay that consisted of the neighborhood boundaries, I think that would be the best solution, because you really want to keep that the way you do. So if there was an overlay that you can then superimpose upon that, so that people could have a better understanding of what neighborhoods actually got, if that's possible.
Okay. Thank you.
We would also, I mean, this is a good presentation slide, but sometimes we want to have handouts for like when we go meet with, say, well, even our own community members, but, you know, public officials or media. So if there's a way to, where it's more printer friendly, so it won't use up so much ink, so maybe, you know, instead of a black background, a lighter background.
I have a question. Is the legend in dollars?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like $0 to 70, like?
7 million.
7 million, okay. If you could just make that a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
7 million, like a 7 and a capital M or something. Great.
I would say too, if you can do like a table again, that says like the top 10 neighborhoods, obviously Duluth is clearly the top.
Yeah.
That would bring the point home too.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would also ask, since we're especially interested in the south side, if you could do maybe the top 5, and then do the community areas, you know, South Shore, South Chicago, east side.
Okay, yeah.
Are those numbers, from where I am, it's hard for me to tell, are those 000s or are there words? What is that? Behind the
Yeah,
numbers?
those are numbers, those are like 5, 7 million. They're just arbitrary.
So is that word million that I'm just not being able to read?
No, it's zeros and numbers.
Well, but it would be a lot easier
Yeah.
if the word said million, 100 million, 1,000, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm looking at them thinking, are all those zeros, and I just don't know how many it is, you know? So.
Actually, in some ways, for the Lincoln Yards, we don't really know the number is still up in the air.
Exactly.
And the amount is so enormous that, I mean, it's literally affecting the whole city.
Yeah, but that's a spend, so I think you were looking at what has occurred.
Right. Just
But
to be able to read it.
It's a citywide issue.
Definitely.
I just want to say, this map is really cool, and it kind of shows what we all suspected,
Right.
where the money's going, so I really like the way that you did it, so.
Yeah.
I know everyone's making suggestions to tweak it, but just making it so it's clearer and better, but it's, honestly, this
Good information.
says a lot.
Yes.
It is a nice
It's
one.
black and green.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Thank you so
Mike,
much.
right.
One thing for sure, we didn't need to paint the glass.
She that man, yeah. I don't know. I got lost count when I started. You know what I'm talking about.
So, I realize this is a bit harder to read, but I wanted to identify potential areas for transit-oriented development, or development that includes a mix of residential, commercial, cultural, and institutional uses near transit. Mixed-use developments near transit attract people and add vibrance as well as connectedness within communities. The map on the left orients us with the location of metro stations with a half-mile radius around them and vacant lots within this half-mile radius. So there's 2 things that I wanted to show this map. First, research shows that a half-mile is a distance that people are willing to walk in order to get to transit at most. A half-mile is about a 10 to 15-minute walk, or if you were to think about it, it's about like 4 blocks. And although there are metro stations located within a half-mile of South Shore and South Chicago, not so much the east side, Metra, as we all know, is significantly more expensive. An L train fare costs $2.50 each way, while a Metro train fare costs $4.25 to, for example, South Chicago 93rd Street. And then secondly, vacant lots within a half-mile radius qualify for transit-oriented development. The vacant lots are represented in a lime green color, and as you can see, there are more vacant lots near South Chicago's metro stations, while the north side in general has very little to none, most likely because everything has already been developed. So I just wanted to show that there's so much potential for development near transit in the South Chicago and South Shore communities.
Are you advocating the need for public transit?
Yes, but more so the development around it in order to attract more residents and in that way.
Because in the communities of East Side and Hegbush, it's a transportation desert after 10:30 at night.
Right, so this is what this map also says, that there's absolutely no transit near the east side. So yes.
So there are areas in this general community where development could happen, but Metra, with their southeast line, are not really making an effort to work with potential developers, if they were able to extend the end of the South Chicago branch just a half mile, that would probably, and obviously we have to work with local residents and all that, but that would help spur development. And I haven't seen any headlines about Metro taking an interest in that, which needs to go to those at the top, to talk to the Metro board.
So I would say if you're interested in policy stuff and making changes in our neighborhood, stick around for after the presentations. These presentations, the idea is that we can use these in order to like educate ourselves and our communities about where the need is, but also for our public officials and media, so that we can get the type of developments that we want and not get the developments that we don't want. So I know we have, how many more presentations?
4 of the long slideshows.
Okay, so we have 4 more presentations. I do want to make sure that we get through them, especially because we have some presentations that are coming up on recommendations or ideas for developments. I want to make sure we get to them. So if we could keep it just to comments on how this works for us as far as handouts or presentations.
Yes, one quick comment. So this is just on Metro stuff, right?
Yes.
I think you should say that in your title because it's a big difference between Metro and CTA and everything like that. And the second thing is, one thing to dig deeper into your data is to look at the frequency. So if you get trapped in South Chicago Metro right now, you're trapped for a whole hour. They come once an hour and no more, no less. Maybe, during rush hours a few often. If Hyde Park and further north is every 15, 20 minutes. So if the map could, I don't know if this map needs to show it, but maybe just research the frequency of the metro coming through those areas. Because it definitely comes here way less. And they've cut back service over here a lot.
Yeah.
I think just, I know you said it in your presentation, but if you could put it on the map, or maybe it is there, I just can't see it, but scale. So like, how big is half a mile?
Yeah, I'll definitely make sure that's that, but. Oh, right, okay, yeah, I didn't even put a north for
Yeah.
snowbar.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
All right, let's give a big round of hands for Mark. Okay, now we have a series of longer presentations for you that were focused around a certain subject area. So the students were also divided up into groups, looking at South Shore, South Chicago, and the East Side with a lens on a certain subject area. And they are also thinking about recommendations. So these are longer slides, these will have some images, and these were also group presentations. So please share your adjustments to the presentations or your reactions to their recommendations. So we'll start off with affordable housing.
Oh, yeah. Hey y'all, so I'm Isabel, Aggie, Linda, and we're here to talk about affordable housing, community benefit agreements, and everyone in this room, because this is obviously something that y'all care about because it came out today.
So something that we really focused on is asset-based community development. It focuses on the strengths of the community rather than what the community has with problems. So people are seen as producers instead of consumers. So the focus is more on what kind of skills people can bring to the table and what is already existing in the community rather than relying on outside resources. And this is really vital within housing because there are so many housing assets within South Chicago. And these can be utilized to improve the entire housing market and increase access to affordable housing. So this community in particular would benefit a lot more from more affordable housing than some of the development plans that have been presented for Southworks that have more luxury or high income housing. And then just to go over some of the assets that we kind of saw as important within South Chicago. Within this neighborhood, there are primarily multi-generational families who have a strong desire to stay and see it thrive. So in a lot of Chicago neighborhoods, there's a lot of moving in and out and changes within the neighborhood. But this neighborhood in particular has a lot of people who have been here for a long time. So we saw that as a really important 26% of the housing market is vacant, and while this could be seen as a problem, we kind of focus on the potential that this housing could be something else. Also, Claretian Associates already offers affordable housing programs that have proven to be successful. And there are a lot of, so we looked a lot with unemployment statistics, and there's a really high rate of unemployment in this neighborhood. But we saw it as more of an asset because there are so many community members who could be mobilized within the workforce within housing. And then finally, 29% of the population is under the age of 20. So there are a lot of young people, and if given like educational and work opportunities, they could really be an asset to the community and be able to invest and become homeowners themselves.
So we wanted to just open up the presentation real quick to just hear from y'all because you guys are going to be the most important voices and perspectives in figuring out how to preserve and create and expand affordable housing assets in South Shore, South Chicago, and the Southeast side. So like, if I could just get like one or two people to kind of say like why they live where they live or like what they really like about their neighborhood or their house. Yeah.
Diversity and transportation.
All right, cool. Yeah, I brought up pen and paper so I can just have this too. Diversity and transportation. Anyone else have something like off the top of their head? Yeah.
I don't live in this immediate area, but I spend most of my life here. And it is a living, working class museum.
Yeah.
But we don't see the assets. We don't always.
Yeah, so the reason we do this, like, is we practice like identifying assets and identifying what we like about neighborhoods and the neighborhoods we live in is so that like we can direct money and funds and efforts to kind of preserving. And you said that there's like a strong history of working class neighborhoods. So like, how do we preserve that history and expand on it, or even like highlight it in different? You know, the South Works site has has like a little monument to it. So stuff like that, you can ask the developers for. And like also, we talked about like the Claretian Associates as an asset. So this is already a successful example of affordable housing. And one policy recommendation that we kind of talked about was, right now the city of Chicago has an ordinance called the Affordable Requirements Ordinance. And so the developer is supposed to have 10% affordable units in their new developments. And if they don't do this, they're supposed to pay to the ARO fund. But that's kind of been a problematic fund because a lot of money goes missing. There's not a lot of actual units that are generated from that fund. So we kind of thought of like a good way to kind of mitigate this is like actually having an affordable housing that works, that's an asset here. The Claretian Associates either get money from the developer to build and manage their own, or directly get money to just expand their services that they provide. Because that's an asset that's already here, it's already working, and they're already familiar with the people in the neighborhood and what they need.
I have something I wanted to ask. On the right side of it, you're speaking in terms of Claretian. We know that they're the ones that's just taken over the Y, which had been here from
95 years.
Right, I don't know what the sign on it says, but, and Claretian has that now. One of the assets for the Y is that it is for the neighborhood. People could come and use it. And now that Claretian has taken it over, they're talking about trying to bring something back for similar to what the Y had to offer. And to my mind, I'm thinking with all these developers who have assets and whatever, it seems to me that they should be working more with Claretian to bring back the things that was at the Y that's not here, because there's no place else for it over here. Yeah. So it's a big void. So to me, when they're doing this, one of the top highlights should be anything that used to be here, that kept families here longer, bring some of that back so that people will have a reason to stay or to come back family-wise. Because otherwise, if you just keep taking things away and adding little pieces in, that's not a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's the Ys seem to be like as an asset here, and we want that. So definitely by highlighting the Y and having conversations with developers, like we need funding in the Y. Yes. That's where you need to put it. You definitely can advocate for that.
centers, parks, and housing advocates and local community-based organizations have increasingly recognized that when large parks are built in historically marginalized urban areas, they can contribute to green gentrification, which is a process involving increases in housing prices and the influx of new, wealthier, and often white residents in low-income communities of color. It can lead to the displacement of longtime residents that many park equity efforts are designed to serve. UCLA wrote a policy report that gathered the best strategies to combat green gentrification. So strategies that protect renters or provide them with services, especially renters in existing units, include just cause eviction ordinance, rent control, rent review board, renters workshops that empower and educate, risk mitigation fund for displaced renters, and renters commission. Other services for low-income renters. Strategies to preserve or create home ownership among long-term low-income residents. This includes foreclosure assistance, forgivable loans for home improvements, home buyers club, which educate on how to buy a house, home buyer financial assistance, for example, like getting money together for a down payment, property tax freeze for low-income homeowners, and accessory dwelling units and contact lot subdivision.
And just to build up with that, South Chicago and the South Shore have pretty high rates of homeownership in this area. So like that's a big asset in housing. Based off of like the statistics that Chicago has, the city of Chicago has given us, is basically like I think it's in South Chicago, about like 28% of residents own their homes, which is pretty good considering that it's only 30% citywide. So that's just an asset that we would want to build on if we're talking about affordable housing and kind of building immunity to gentrification. And so one of that would be to use these strategies that are specifically for homeowners to kind of expand homeownership in these neighborhoods, and just kind of, if people want to stay here, if they own their homes, it's a lot easier for them to stay. Yeah, did you have a comment?
Quick question. I'm from here. I lived in Miami 15 years. And Habitat for Humanity did some really good stuff in Miami. And would you consider them a potential asset to build some homes on the south side?
I mean, yeah, if the community wants that and the community has like a good contract with.
I mean, I look at a small 3-bedroom home with a driveway or maybe even a garage, and the family has to help contribute to the construction. I saw good things happen with that in Miami. It's not a panacea for everything, but if they were to build 50 of them, let's say, across the south side, it would take away some empty lots, put homes on the tax rolls, and would be positive for local families.
Yeah.
So building on existing strategies, job training programs to tackle both
Speak up.
And vacant housing, potential to establish co-ops, shared housing between seniors and students and young people, vacancy taxes for developers who buy property without utilizing for anything that would help the community. These taxes can be funneled back into the housing. Instead of investing in an ARO, put money in Cleavage Associates. Rezoning to allow coach houses to be used as secondary rental units, and offering low interest loans to homeowners. Aging housing stock requires maintenance.
So yeah, these are just, yeah, and most importantly, the best asset is you all, and everyone's in this room. So the biggest way to ensure affordable housing is community input. So talking to aldermen, attending community meetings like this one, and joining coalitions to create a community benefits agreements ordinance or have a community benefits agreement. And then community-driven processes are the most valuable tool to preserve affordable housing and expand affordable housing. And all these tools that we brought to y'all are not going to be worth anything unless it fits your vision of your community. Because at the end of the day, we may have some kind of knowledge in sustainable urban development, but y'all are the experts in the places you live.
Are there any examples of cities or places that have really good affordable housing or have policies that keep homeowners or renters where they are?
Unfortunately, like from what I know, I'm mostly versed in Chicago. We're not really that good at preserving affordable housing. We're in an affordable housing crisis right now, and there's a lot of different organizations across Chicago and different neighborhoods that are working against that. So I'm sure that there's research more out there, but at this time, I think also like nationwide, there's also like nationwide efforts to expand rent control and other affordable housing policies. So it's not just Chicago. Like Chicago, this isn't just a problem in Chicago. I think it's a problem across most American cities.
So that UCLA like study looked at things that worked across the United States, and they gathered it up and they put it into one place for us. So if you go to that, you can see what has worked and why it has worked, and maybe how we can implement it here.
So I think that'd be helpful to put in your presentation that, because I know you mentioned UCLA, but I didn't realize it's taking like best practices. So it'd be helpful to know, and even if you could highlight some of those, like in Denver they did this, or in New York this happened, so.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen a senior development work?
I haven't seen it. It's a new program, and it was happening in God, I can't remember the city, but it was because like elderly were seniors were had a giant house, and young people couldn't afford just out of college couldn't afford to live in the city, so they were living just on the outskirts of the city, like downtown area, and it was a great relationship between both of them, because they gave affordable housing and it gave the seniors companionship, and extra money, and it helped them a lot overall. So it was that dual beneficial.
And also
that family development, you're saying it's like seniors with homes.
Yeah.
Right.
It also helped to keep the seniors in their homes, because a lot of the times they have to downscale or move somewhere else, but it allowed them to stay in their own homes.
I know, thank you so much for the questions. I know I'd like to keep rolling because we have some longer presentations. So thank you guys again. Next up we have our green technology group.
Hi guys, we are the Green Technologies Buildings Water Group. We are the environmental group. So I'll quickly give a quick just on what this presentation means to do. So this presentation really talks about different recommendations, and there's going to be a lot of them, where we can put more assets and build upon assets that are already in these communities that are sustainable and that will be sustainable in the future, as well as equitable. And keep in mind that some of these might seem like they're more oriented towards Southworks, but the majority are meant to be in the communities and not just that big land lots of Southworks. So.
So first up is air purification. And so air purification is something we feel strongly about. It stands on its own, to be honest. And something that's really worth noting is that Southeast Chicago has some of the worst air quality in Chicago. And there's already a Southeast Environmental Task Force that was created, and it monitors air quality within the area. And they've been doing testing recently, and they've been found particulate matter is a big problem in the area. And we think that air purification would not only do things for the existing environmental injustices, but it would also allow for development within the Southworks site.
So another thing that we wanted to talk about is recycling and composting. So some ideas for that is to provide either free or very low costing recycling bins and the services that come with that to the community. There would also be some ways to educate the community, like flyers or handouts either mailed or given out describing like the different categories of recycling.
installing rainwater collection tanks in multiple areas, whether it's for individual use or for the local businesses that are there. And then creating local composting gardens that will produce free and organic fertilizers. Again, that's either for local or groups or any of those. And all these things can help engage the community to work together. It also helps to reduce the energy that's needed for the water treatment, and then reduce the amount of waste that's in landfills.
So my slide is explaining LEED awarded buildings. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So a building can be awarded for exterior and interior designs, its construction, building maintenance, homes, and neighborhood in general can all achieve the LEED status. It creates a good example for sustainable developments and promotes a sustainable mindset to the surrounding area and community. And specifically in the Southwork site, it would provide bathrooms, amenities, and community space free for the public.
This is the health equipment in major streets and parks. So I took a look at the map, and while we were looking at the neighborhood, and saw that there's a lot of big commercial streets, such as Commercial Avenue and 83rd and 78th. And we were thinking, what are some ways that we could bring back people to use these streets? We took in mind that often there is a multi-generational element in which elder or senior citizens spend more time with younger people. And when you take younger kids to the park, there's usually not a lot for senior citizens to do. So we looked at ways that actually putting health equipment in parks and major streets actually helps create those multi-generational bonds, which is really interesting. It also revitalizes some of these streets and parks. So these could be implemented in Russell Park, Russell Square Park, and Bessemer Park as an opportunity for seniors and younger people to further just cohabitate. And it's also a very sustainable way to just bring more activity into those areas. My next slide just talks about another multifunctional structure that is built, just outdoor amphitheaters. These can be used for gathering spaces, farmers markets, art shows, anything that just brings the community together. And it doesn't have to have just one purpose of maybe like theater. It could be so many purposes, and it's something that the community could use year round. And it is outside. So this is a great way that developers could provide money for this beyond just jobs. Another great thing about this is that it could allow for permeable concrete to be placed, which would allow for stormwater management, as that is one of those things that we look at when we're thinking about climate change impacts in the future.
Another great business idea we were thinking of was outdoor adventure parks, which have become more popular recently, and there are some in Illinois, but they're in the suburbs, so there are none in Chicago as of right now. And essentially it would help bring people to spend more time outdoors, but also help gain like locals for carpentry and construction building skills, which they could be trained for as they build the park, and then they could take with them to other jobs. And it's also a great way to get exercise and just spend more time outdoors, which we were talking about, and bring on more community health benefits. An example we came across that we really liked was the Method Soap Factory in the Pullman Historic District of Chicago. So it's a really amazing facility. It came here like within a few years ago. And essentially they make like eco-friendly soap. And so when they constructed it, they brought on 100 jobs, and they put an emphasis on hiring locals. They also have a 75,000 square foot urban roof where they actually grow, so they lease it to another company, and there they grow over 5,000 tons of fresh produce, which they then sell through like local businesses and also farmers markets. And they have a lot of green energy, so they have solar trees, which are moving solar panels, which rotate towards the sun so that they're always pulling in energy, as well as a wind turbine. So they have like a huge emphasis on providing community benefits, which I thought was really cool. and also just giving the residents something, sorry, giving the residents more access to the facility as well. So they provide a lot of tours and stuff like that.
And it's great because it's so close. to
Right.
where we are, yeah.
So if we study Chicago history, we can see how significant the water and river and lake are for the people in its history. That's why we believe everyone deserves a claim to the water, not just those who are lucky to have enough money to have a boat or something like that. Down here along the Calumet River and down by the southward site, there is a lot of waterfront that is possible to rehabilitate and reintegrate into natural habitats. And a way to do this is by river walks. And there's an example of a few river walks in Chicago that have been rehabilitated and reintegrated as nature centers. And spot one of those is Northside Chicago College Prep River Walk. And it used to look like the top picture. And after doing work, it was transformed into a way for people to engage with the river by fishing and being able to take their boats out. We believe this can be done down here as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that is all we have for you guys. Thank you.
With the next group can start getting ready.
One quick question on sustainability. Which university in Chicago is doing the most on sustainability? At IIT, they have both solar panels and wind turbines. I mean, that's like something that's your next assignment.
I have a question. The information that you gave is very good, and it goes along with all the other information that we've been getting with affordable housing and everything like that. If you have people who are willing to invest in affordable housing from the ground up, and I'm glad you brought up about the soap industry, when they're doing affordable housing, because of so many different reasons why kids can't go out and play, if you have housing that's going up, then utilize the rooftop. You can have gardens up there, you can have playgrounds up there, and they will be outside. They don't even have to walk outside and get shot at or whatever. But with the new communities that are coming up, we may have to stop looking at out and look more at up. So that might be something that could be spoken more when you're doing it, especially with the environmental concerns.
Like unconventional green spaces?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One thing you guys, I don't know if you guys mentioned urban growers, or just like the local urban farms and Gregory Brands. I don't know the name of it.
Urban Collective?
You know the name of the Urban Growers Collective.
Urban Growers Collective.
Has a farm right at Schaefer Park over there. I don't know if you guys mentioned Schaefer Park either, but I don't know because they don't even have a bench or a trash can.
Okay.
It's just kind of like a plot of land, right? Thank you. It's just open space, right?
We have to leave at 3:30.
Yeah, just as far as the research.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. And we can take questions.
So for our presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about healthy communities, what they are, and then how we recommend they can be implemented in South Chicago. Okay, so first we want to just define what is a healthy community. So our definition that we came up with is a healthy community is one that has institutions, businesses, and professionals accessible to the community to ensure physical, mental, and spiritual health and support at any time an individual may need it. And we wanted to place emphasis on the fact that it's whenever an individual feels that they, sorry, you can sit down.
You just said
It's when an individual thinks that they need help with their health. It's not when another authority figure or an institution thinks that they should need it. So we just wanted to make that very clear.
Yeah, and then just kind of building off of that, everything that we've touched upon today is a part and contributes to what a healthy community is. So we're going to talk about very 4 specific areas for recommendations, but I just wanted to mention that building a healthy community and maintaining it is a lot more than what we're going to talk about. But it includes things as employment, public transportation, housing, community services, civic engagement, things like arts, culture, healthcare services, and then also just general physical, emotional, mental safety of the community as well.
And then these are some ideas we came up with how a healthy community committee can be implemented. And so we have access to nutritional food, promotion of healthy lifestyles, disease prevention, creating opportunities for healthier living, and improved natural and built environments. And our recommendations kind of center around these ideas as well.
Okay, so now we're going to get into our recommendations, or kind of just like ideas that we brainstormed for South Chicago. And I want to note that we're focusing on using asset-based community development with these ideas, so kind of taking the assets that South Chicago already has and trying to like play upon those.
So our first recommendation would be a food co-op. And to start off, what is a co-op? The definition of a co-op is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly and democratically controlled enterprise. And some characteristics of a co-op include democratic member control, and this means members are representative, they have a voice, and are a part of decision making. And co-ops are autonomous, they're controlled by their members, and co-ops often provide education, training, and information to its members so their members can effectively contribute. And so a food co-op would carry out all these values while in the role of a grocery store. And then why would a food co-op be beneficial to South Chicago? It would put decision-making in the hands of the community while improving access to healthy food as well as the types of food that the community wants and needs. And it would also create an opportunity for jobs in the community. And overall, it just has roots in the community and has the potential to strengthen and bring people together.
So another idea we had was a nature sanctuary, and we thought that Southworks would be a really good place to put this. So some of the benefits of a nature sanctuary is it provides cleaner air. Obviously, where there are more trees and more nature, the air is going to be cleaner, so that will help with physical health. And then we could grow fresh plants for the community to eat, so that will obviously also help with physical health. And then also, being in nature and working with nature really helps with mental health, and it gives people a sense of purpose, something to look forward to. So according to Mind.org, ecotherapy can help with moderate depression and anxiety, which I know is a big problem nowadays. And so having like that interaction with nature and being able to like take your mind off things and work with nature could really help the mental health of residents. And so also in terms of growing plants in this sanctuary, we know that the soil may or may not be necessarily safe to grow foods that we would consume right now because of the steel industry. So we would use reclaimed materials like tires or like raised pots and stuff like that to grow food that we would eat. But then we would plant like trees and other things in the soil that like things we wouldn't eat. And then another idea we had in order to solve the problem of the soil maybe having contaminated material is something called phytoextraction. So there are certain plants that naturally will take those toxic metal properties out of soil. Some examples of these plants are sunflowers, Indian mustard, and the willow tree. So not only will these like beautify the area, but they'll also help clean the soil. And then another idea we had for this sanctuary would be using the ore walls as a place to put some solar panels. And so these would help power any community facilities that we'd be implementing, so that way it's not coming out of like community members' pockets, it will be coming from the solar panels.
Yeah, and to briefly talk about the physical health of the community, obviously we can construct some recreation centers, especially around this nature sanctuary that we're proposing. And as you can see, maintaining physical health is kind of how we get through our daily lives. And some statistics from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. These are just a few that I found quite eye-opening, that 2 in 3 children are not physically active every day. 95% of adults don't participate in at least 30 minutes of activity each day. And physical activity is just defined as any sort of physical activity that expends energy, as like walking. And now kids are spending about 7.5 hours a day in front of the screen looking at it, whether that be in school or just coming home and playing video games or watching TV or something. So what we'd like to do then is create development specifically for the community, and implement programs that are associated with this new nature sanctuary, whether this be through the Chicago Park District with after-school or even out-of-school programs, or even, you know, a YMCA like we had previously discussed a little bit in another presentation. Bringing that back and, you know, really making the healthy choice an easier one to make.
Yeah, and I also just want to include that having something like the YMCA, something that's going to be building community, adds to that sense of community belonging, which like not only adds to like the physical health of the community, but also like the mental health. You're going to be more invested in the community, and just like the development outcomes and assets that go along with that. And then finally, the last kind of subcategory that we focused on was like specifically healthcare centered facilities. So some recommendations, while there were hospitals, pharmacies, and a couple urgent care like facilities already in the community, we proposed that there could be more healthcare or mental health related facilities, just because, as we mentioned earlier, depression, anxiety, just other mental illnesses are really prevalent today. And thankfully, like the stigma around those are lessening, so we can be better as a community and just like as like humans overall, like talking about it and reaching out for access and care and help for those. And then specifically prenatal care. Obviously, as we mentioned earlier in one of the other presentations, we do have a large younger demographic in South Chicago, so there's going to be more like new moms, new families, so we want to make sure they're getting adequate care and access to it. Again, harm reduction sites, which is going to be more of a like preventative type care, and a lot of these do kind of fall into that subcategory of preventative care, which for this community overall, well, for any community really, like preventative care is awesome because it's going to cost less for patients, but then also cost less for the medical professional centers too. So you're not spending as much money trying to like you had a heart attack, oh God, like now I have to pay all this money because it was too late, I didn't know the signs, I didn't get like the adequate help to avoid this. So this is kind of helping to lessen the overall burden of potential health risks for the community. But going on, we could also have more urgent care centers. Well, those are going to be a little bit more pricey. Obviously, accidents do happen, and we want to make sure the community does have access to all of these health resources. We have youth advocacy programs can be helpful. Again, we do have a younger population in South Chicago. And then we want to make sure that there's health care for the uninsured. While this is a largely like working class community, we do know that healthcare isn't necessarily equitable for all, and the costs are varying between like what your health insurance is going to cover, what it doesn't cover. So we want to make sure that's addressed. And kind of building off of that, the idea of free vaccines as prevention for families is also really important to make sure that people are able to go to work, your kids are able to go to school, get that education, and not be missing out on your like day-to-day activities. And then we also proposed extended pharmacy hours, again, because it is working class. We might not necessarily be able to get home in time to go to the pharmacy, pick up your medication. And obviously you need your medication to stay healthy, go to work. So it's kind of all going back to this like cycle of health. And then also we talked about extended community transportation to and from the hospital. So something similar to a shuttle, a bus system. This could add jobs for people if they like wanted to be the like transportation driver, helping people get back and forth. Just kind of adding to the overall access of the professional health settings. And then I just decided to throw in some real world examples so we know that these are possible and doable for the community if they choose to invest in them. So the first example was the Cook County Hospital in County Care. So this hospital did a good job of providing healthcare services for the uninsured or really anyone. You couldn't be denied of a healthcare service because you didn't have insurance or it wasn't enough to cover whatever the procedure was. But more specifically, again, they don't deny any services to patients based on their ability to pay. County Care is a no-cost Medicaid managed care or care health plan for people in Cook County, and then County Care offers a wide range of health services and expert care no cost to members. The second example we have is the Chicago Department of Public Health does have walk-in immunization clinics. So this is kind of building off of the idea of free vaccines. I looked on their website and they only have 3 locations for this. I don't believe any are in South Chicago as of right now, but if they could possibly extend to this community, that would really help out in the prevention of communicable diseases and just kind of like the overall health of our children and youth in the population. And then addressing the harm reduction sites, we could also have a proposed clean needle exchange. This is important because one, it addresses addiction transportation, which every community has that, whether we want to talk about it or not. I think it's important to address that, but also it's going to help prevent the transmission and exchange of blood-borne illnesses and viruses, which is obviously very deadly. And then lastly, we have an example of the extended community transportation for hospitals, which was functioning through the MedStar Health. And basically, their program enables patients to schedule rides through Uber when booking medical appointments. While the service is currently self-pay, MedStar is working to obtain Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement. So while I think that is a really great example, I do want to recognize not everyone has an iPhone, not everyone has Uber, not everyone has the means to pay for Uber or like a rideshare service. This I just thought was like a kind of new lens and a creative approach to providing transportation for people that might not necessarily have immediate access to hospitals or healthcare settings.
Great, we have time for just like one question or comment.
I would just say that as somebody that works in athletic facility issues citywide, because CPS and the park district don't have enough, being healthy includes being able to work out. And Chicago needs about 20 to 25 more 400-meter tracks. So there are some being built as I speak.
Thank you very much.
Strangely enough, he's not. I don't think he popped on yet. I don't think he popped on. I'll be okay. Because he is one of my good ones following. Oh, okay.
Heather, is this the last one?
This is the last one.
Do you think switching the light, since there's nothing, no handout, would be helpful? Yeah.
And y'all started this light thing again.
So our presentation is about transportation recommendations in South Chicago. My name is Magda.
I'm Ella.
Chris?
Okay, so the current transportation that's available in South Chicago right now, so the Metro, which is twice the price of the CTA, you can't transfer on it, and it's very inaccessible and inconvenient as it only comes hourly and every half hour during rush hours. The CTA bus, which doesn't come as often as needed. Cars are an option, but those are expensive and they are very inaccessible for a lot of people. And walking is an option, but walking is a good option for like bridging gaps between public transit and destinations, but it's not good for long distance.
Stop.
Sorry, just go ahead and keep going. Well,
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the other slides.
Yeah, like it froze. Okay.
So a little bit about South Chicago's transportation demographics. The most popular mode of transit right now is driving alone. 53.1% of residents drive, while 35.6% of residents take transit. And then others carpool. There's a very small percentage of people that carpool and then walk or bike. And then just to give context to that as to where are people driving, where are people taking train. 37.8% of people work outside of Chicago, 17.7% live in the Loop, and then only 2.5% of people actually work in South Chicago. So data shows that there's a small percentage of people working or actually employed in South Chicago. Therefore, access to transit as well as frequent travel times is crucial in order to accommodate the 37.8% of residents who work outside of Chicago and rely on transit. And then better reliable transportation also allows one to be less car dependent. Okay, this is, so transportation economics. The CTA bus fare costs $2.50 one way, and a 30-day CTA bus or rail pass is $105. And then the Metra train fare costs $4.25 one way, which is 70% more expensive than the CTA train fare. A monthly Metra pass to South Chicago, 93rd Street, is $125, which is significantly more expensive than the CTA. This is a lot of money as the train comes infrequently with many riders, sometimes waiting up to an hour during the day for the train.
So approach and development of proposals. So the input from community members and organizations, so this is like people asking for more metro stations or services or for CTA. Active transportation, so the Transit Future campaign. So this is again like a proposal to change metro lines to a CTA line. Mike Payne's Gray Line proposal, so this would be an extra L line that would come down towards the South Chicago area, and that would be like CTA, so you could transfer to all the other CTA lines. And then a study of South Chicago's transportation demographics, so that's how people are using public transit and how they're getting around their neighborhood and other neighborhoods.
Yeah, sure. So, we'll go over some examples in other cities around the country and around the world that we think we're able to successfully deliver transportation solutions in scenarios where parallels can be drawn to South Chicago. First, in Denver. In the late 90s, in Denver, Colorado, they were found themselves as a city with very few transit options, but a lot of old rail rights of way to develop. They had an old airport that they closed, and so what they did was center new development at the airport and elsewhere in the city around these unused rail lines. They built not new subway systems, which would be obviously expensive, but kind of added solutions along the way with light rail, buses, and commuter trains, and put them all under one system so that riders could use one card and one fare to transfer between different modes of transit, no matter what mode they were. And they're still working on that initial proposal, but the project is still going on today. Second example we have is in London, where they, also in the late 90s, found themselves with a lot of unused, or rather underused rail lines. Kind of like the Metro, they were designed for commuter rail, and so they were overly expensive for riders and didn't really fit the context of being within the city of London. So what they did was they combined a lot of commuter rail lines into one agency called the London Overground. They integrated it with the payment system for the London Underground and allowed for free transfers between those systems, and were able to reduce fares as a result. So essentially they took an old commuter rail line, turned it into a rapid transit line with greater frequency of trains. And the third example we'll use is in Toronto. I think a lot of parallels can be drawn between Chicago and Toronto. They're both cities on one of the Great Lakes. They both have relatively equal population and area. And so with Toronto's regional rail line, kind of like their version of the Metro, they found riders were unhappy with the access to the region as a whole. Riders can usually only get to downtown.
Thank you, everyone.
So essentially riders can only get to downtown and can only get to downtown during peak hours. So what they did was just ran more trains in the commuter rail lines, and this actually saw 30% increase in ridership, which is pretty substantial. And this was inspired by a similar project in Paris, which saw similar results, which was essentially just doing the simple thing of running more trains on infrastructure that already exists. Much cheaper option than building something new. No? Never mess up again?
Okay, well. It's all right, just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause they're doing good anyway.
Our recommendations are basically for the conversion of metro electric lines within Chicago to the CTA Rapid Electric Rail Service. We would also consolidate both the CTA and the metro into a single regional agency with unified fares and transfers within the entire Chicago area. We also have an idea of a new CTA service rail line on the unused Skyway Rail corridor. We would also have an idea of extending the Green Line just to make, we have the map. We would also like to extend the Green Line just to make connection between the other metro lines easier, as well as new divvy stations to link up with the new transit, along with the integration of a fare payment system as well. And then another dedicated bus lane on 95th, just because it needs more of that extra service, yeah.
I think if we had maps up on the screen, it would
be 10 times
more-
better.
more accurate.
Yeah. Spent like 4 hours making these maps, but whatever.
We will share them with you, so just make sure that you have your contact information on the sign-in sheet, and we will get it to you. If you don't have access to email, let me know after the meeting, and we'll figure out a way to, you can come by our office and pick up a hard copy, okay?
I have a quick question. You were going over percentages of people as to where they work. So when you say South Chicago, is it the percentage of people, once again, just in that neighborhood of South Chicago, or
it's
the 10 ward, or
it's the
Southeast?
residents of the South Chicago community area where they work.
And so what was the percentage that worked downtown?
It was
17%.
And how does that compare to other neighborhoods in the city? Do you have
the number one employment center is actually outside of Chicago, which is one reason why we find it important to give access to the entire region, not just within the city, because.
But I was just curious, how does that compare, let's say, to residents on the north side? So it would be interesting to know. Comparatively.
Yeah. But just to go into a little further detail with our transit proposals, obviously, once again, the maps will be shared with you, and I think that exemplifies it more clearly. But this new idea we have is essentially a rapid electric rail service on the current metro lines. It's not building CTA tracks, it's not keeping the metro as it is, it's perhaps getting faster trains, running them more frequently, with minimal new construction, and integrating that into the CTA system as well. So sort of like in Denver, where they, instead of building a new rail line, just added a commuter rail line into the existing fare system. Metro Electric under this plan would function effectively as a CTA line, even if it doesn't look exactly like it.
And of course, something important which people have already shared with us is the emphasis on rapid. We don't want metro trains coming every hour or every half hour. For commuters, you want community members to actually be able to use these new lines as the same as CTA lines. So times with trains coming in maybe every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes or something that we are hoping for.
One more additional recommendation we have to look into is actually numbering the CTA lines. This would completely, of course, reimagine the system. But South Chicago and Chicago in general has a large non-English speaking population. And studies have shown that it is more accessible to non-English speakers to have numbered lines rather than lines that are names of colors, or even if you're colorblind. I'm of course from New York, so this is probably my bias speaking on the main transit lines, but I think that's an interesting strategy, and the more lines you have, the more useful it can be.
When you were doing this, do you have a percentage of how on the South Chicago side is seniors?
We don't have that
I don't
data,
think we
but
have that.
it's definitely accessible on the from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for planning. They have data on those kind of things.
I didn't understand what you said.
Sorry, the CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, they have an entire document about specific demographics of things like that in this community area.
Did you do anything as far as CTA transfers to the metro? We
Yeah,
don't have
so we had an idea of extending the green line to kind of make up for connecting to the Metro electric line. It would just be so much easier to visualize it for you guys, but given
Where would it connect approximately?
Around 63rd.
Around 63rd
Yeah.
Street? Okay. And then,
I think you have to look very deep into the rail, but I would do more investigation in the bus and the biking. There's a lot of bus lines over here. I mean, the bus comes more frequently, and you can get downtown almost close to the metro, depending on which bus you get. There are express routes. Also with the bike, you guys mentioned dipping stations. I would look up the dipping stations because we don't have many over here. So that could be another proposal to get more dipping stations, especially we're closer to Lakeshore Drive.
Yeah, we actually did propose a few more dipping stations just to maximize that connection between different kinds of transit. You mentioned the bus route, so we wanted to have more buses and just more faster and better rapid service going on the 95th bus route. Are there any more that you have in mind or for consideration?
No, I just noticed there wasn't like a map for the bus. I think you need, like, your presentation needs a map. This is the bus route.
Yeah, I mean, we need maps in general, yeah.
But obviously we didn't see the whole.
Yeah, we had a lot of maps that we wanted to show you guys.
and we'll share all the presentations with ASE and with Amalia, so I apologize for the Stain Center projector, which we will be tossing in the garbage. But I wanted to say thank you again to all of you for coming. We're going to start packing up. Unfortunately, we have class time constraints and we have to get going, but if you guys want to ask a particular group questions, we'll be around for just a minute or two. But thank you guys again. Thank you to all of you for coming out.